Your gut is a mess. You're gassy all the time, you bloat after eating, and you always have this lingering brain fog. You keep blaming the stress, the alcohol, the trigger foods, but you're not really sure what's going on. So instead of running in circles, continuing to try to guess your way to a better gut, I want to give you a 3-step process to figure out what the fuck is going on. The first step is to figure out the state of your gut. You know your gut is fucked. The first step is understanding what's happening with your gut. And to do this, you need data. You can't just continue to guess your way to a better gut, or you're going to run in circles and make yourself miserable. And the first piece of data you need to collect is your symptoms. If you're consistently having these types of symptoms, then you most likely have a broken gut. There are 2 types of symptoms: digestive symptoms like abdominal pain, cramping, gas, bloating, diarrhea, constipation. Those all point to a broken gut. And then body-wide symptoms, because what happens in the gut affects the entire body because health is connected. These are things like poor sleep, acne, fatigue, sugar cravings, even mood disorders like depression or anxiety can all point to a broken gut. Then you need to assess your bowel movements, one of the most important metrics for assessing your gut health. It's the same way where you check the color of your pee to see how hydrated you are. Checking your bowel movements is a great insight into the state of your digestive health. And there are 3 parts to this. Firstly, we have effort. How effortless does it feel when you use the restroom? If it takes more than a couple of minutes, a lot of effort, or if it's explosive and happens right away, both of those can point to gut issues. Then you have completeness. How empty do you feel after using the restroom? If you feel like you still have some more in you, and then 20 minutes later, you're back in the restroom, that can point to gut issues. And finally, we have rhythm. How consistent do you use the restroom? If you find that one day you're going 4 times a day and another day you're going not at all, or if you find that sometimes you go in the morning, other times you only go at night, both of those can point to gut issues. And finally, you can utilize 2 free objective tests to assess your general gut state. The first one is the Bristol stool test. Here, you're comparing your stool to the chart. If you consistently get type 3 or type 4, that means your gut health is probably in a good place. If you have any of these other types, it can point to gut issues. The second test here is the gut transit test. This is also known as the blue poo test. And what studies have found is this is one of the most effective ways to see the state of your gut health, more effective than anything we've talked about thus far. And what you do is you make muffins with a blue dye. You eat the muffins and you record the time and date. Then you wait to have a green or blue stool and you record the time and date. Then you calculate the time between when you ate the muffins and when they came out of your body. And that is going to give you your gut transit time. If this time is less than 14 hours, it means the food is moving too fast through your gut and you're probably not absorbing the nutrients properly. If this time is greater than 58 hours, it means the food is moving too slow through your guts, and it means there's too many bad bacteria in your gut. So if it's less than 14 hours or over 58 hours, that can point to gut issues. If your transit time is within 14 to 58 hours, based on this study, it means your gut health is in a good place. Okay, so you've done these tests, you figured out your symptoms, and likely your gut is not in a good place. The second step is to rule out bacterial overgrowth, basically having too much bad bacteria in your gut. If you try to heal your gut before eliminating this bacterial overgrowth, you're only going to make your gut issues worse, because when you go and try to eat a bunch of different fibers and eat consistent fermented foods and do all the things that you're told to treat your guts, those things are going to feed this bacterial overgrowth and make your gut worse, not better. So it's really important you make sure it's eliminated before you start to treat your gut issues. And the best way to test for overgrowth is using a breath test, specifically the Trio Smart Breath Test. This test is clinically validated by studies, and it's also one of the only tests on the market that tests for all 3 types of bacterial overgrowth. I have no affiliation, it's just a good test. And it's going to tell you if you have overgrowth and what types you have. You can either have one type or a mix of multiple types, and this is important for when you treat these bacterial overgrowth down the line. Now, the other way you can tell is with your symptoms. If you bloat within 30 minutes of a meal, get excessive gas, or your symptoms started after a food poisoning event, those all point to bacterial overgrowth. Also, if you're constipated or get diarrhea, that can also point to bacterial overgrowth. Now, if you get this breath test and assess your symptoms and it shows you have bacterial overgrowth, you want to focus on fixing that first before you move on to step number 3. However, if it shows you don't have bacterial overgrowth, then move on to step 3, which is testing for dysbiosis and leaky gut. The current approach is to get a microbiome gut health test. This is the only way to objectively test for these issues. This measures the balance of good and bad bacteria in your gut. If it's out of balance, it can point to gut dysbiosis. Now, you also want to test for zonulin to see if you may have leaky gut. This is an indicator to see how well your gut barrier is performing. And if it's malfunctioning, that can lead to leaky gut. Now, unfortunately, these tests are not as reliable as the breath test, and a number of studies have shown that the accuracy within these tests varies significantly, where if you send your stool sample to different test providers, you're going to get different results. And what they also found is if you send the same stool sample multiple times to a single testing provider, you're also going to get different testing results. And to mitigate this, we also want to look at your symptoms. This is something we've been doing the entire video, where we look at both objective data, like the gut transit test, the breath test, and subjective data, like how you bloat after meals or get brain fog, to get a complete picture of what's going on with your gut health. And we use these two different data types because they keep each other in balance, almost like a yin-yang relationship, where objective data is raw, unbiased data that gives us great insights into what's happening with our gut health, but it doesn't take into account how we physically feel, and it can also face testing flaws like accuracy issues, which we see here with the gut microbiome health test. While subjective data takes into account how we physically feel, it leverages that human intuition where we know that something is off with our health, but it can often be biased by our own experiences. So instead of just looking at one or the other, we want to look at both data types to get the most accurate picture of what's going on with our gut health. And so the symptoms you want to look for here are the non-digestive issues like acne, brain fog, or mood problems. If most of these started around the time you got gut issues, it likely points to gut dysbiosis or leaky gut. Now, I know that was a lot of information, so I want to quickly recap what we talked about today. Step 1, you're figuring out the state of your gut. You're assessing the symptoms, doing these tests, and confirming that your gut is not in a good place. Step 2 is to rule out that bacterial overgrowth. You do the breath test, you take into account your symptoms, and if you have bacterial overgrowth, you want to fix that first before moving on to step 3. And if you don't, then move on to step 3. Step 3, you're testing for that dysbiosis and leaky gut. You're going to get the microbiome gut health test. You're going to add the zonulin. Even though it's not the most accurate, you're still going to do it. And to mitigate the accuracy issues, you're also going to take into account your symptoms. And then from there, once you have this data, you can go and fix your gut issues because you actually know what's wrong with your gut. Thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram. And if you'd also like more personalized help with your health, then feel free to reach out to me on there as well. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.